Chapter 1, The Sparkle of a Perfect Day. The morning sun spilled golden light across the sprawling estate of Julian Warwick, a man whose name was synonymous with wealth and influence. His mansion, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, was a marvel of glass and stone, its sleek lines softened by manicured gardens and a sapphire infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. Today, the estate buzzed with a different kind of energy, anticipation. Julian, the tech mogul who had revolutionized renewable energy, was getting married inside the grand foyer. Chandeliers cast prisms of light on marble floors, and the air was thick with the scent of roses and lilies, flown in from Paris. Staff scurried about, arranging last-minute details for the evening ceremony. Julian, at 42, stood before a full-length mirror in his study, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored tuxedo. His dark hair was neatly combed, though a few strands of silver hinted at the years of relentless ambition that had built his empire. His hazel eyes, usually sharp with calculation, softened as he thought of the woman he was about to marry. Cassandra Vale. Cassandra was everything Julian had never known he needed. At 34, she was a vision of elegance, with auburn hair that cascaded in waves, and eyes that seemed to hold secrets only he could unlock. They'd met at a charity gala 6 months ago, her laughter cutting through the din of small talk like a melody. She was a philanthropist, or so she claimed, with a passion for children's education that mirrored Julian's own quiet efforts to fund schools in underserved communities. Their whirlwind romance had felt like fate, and when he proposed under a starlit sky on his private yacht, she'd said yes with tears in her eyes. Now, as Lila sat in her room, the sketchbook opened to a drawing of her mother's face, smiling. With eyes that crinkled at the corners, she felt a pang of determination. She didn't want to ruin her father's happiness, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She slipped off her bed and tiptoed to her desk, where a small wooden box held her treasures, a locket with her mother's photo, a pebble from their last beach trip, and a tiny notebook where she jotted down clues. She'd been keeping track of Cassandra's oddities, her vague answers about her childhood, the way she avoided photos, the locked briefcase she always kept in her guest room downstairs. The wedding preparations were in full swing. Guests were arriving, tech tycoons, celebrities and philanthropists, all dressed in their finest. The lawn had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with white chairs draped in silk and a floral arch framing the ocean view. A string quartet played softly, and waiters glided through the crowd with trays of champagne. Julian stood near the arch, greeting guests with his trademark charm, but his eyes kept drifting to the house, waiting for Cassandra to make her entrance. Lila, meanwhile, had slipped out of her room and into the guest wing, where Cassandra was getting ready. She knew she shouldn't be here. Her father had told her to stay put until the ceremony, but she needed answers. The door to Cassandra's room was ajar, and Lila peeked inside. Cassandra stood before a mirror, her wedding gown a cascade of ivory lace that shimmered in the light. She was adjusting her veil, her movements precise, almost mechanical. On the dresser beside her was the locked briefcase, its leather surface scuffed and worn. Lila's heart thudded. She'd seen Cassandra carry that briefcase everywhere, even on short trips to the city. Once, when Lila had asked what was inside, Cassandra had snapped, "Just boring papers, darling," before softening her tone with a forced smile. Now, as Cassandra stepped away to answer a knock at the door, Lila saw her chance. She darted into the room, her small frame hidden by the folds of a curtain, and crouched beside the dresser. The briefcase had a combination lock, but Lila had watched enough detective shows to know people often used simple codes. She tried 1-2-3-4, then 0-0-0-0, but nothing worked. Then, on a whim, she tried 0-4-2-5, Cassandra's birthday, which she'd mentioned once. The lock clicked. Lila's breath caught. Inside the briefcase were folders, a passport, and a small velvet pouch. She opened the passport first, expecting to see Cassandra's name. Instead, the name read Elena Morrow. And the photo showed a woman with darker hair but Cassandra's unmistakable eyes. Lila's hands trembled as she opened a folder, revealing newspaper clippings about a fraud case in New York. A woman named Elena who'd vanished after swindling investors. There were photos. 2, Cassandra or Elena. With different men, always smiling. Always glamorous. Who's there? Cassandra's voice cut through the silence, sharp and cold. Lila froze, shoving the passport back into the briefcase and snapping it shut. She ducked under the bed just as Cassandra re-entered, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Lila held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Cassandra would hear it. But Cassandra only sighed, muttering something about last-minute nerves, and left the room again. Lila scrambled out, her mind racing. Elena Morrow. Fraud. The pieces were falling into place, but she needed more. She slipped back to her room, clutching her notebook, and began writing down everything she'd seen. She didn't know what it all meant, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let her father marry this woman without knowing the truth. As the ceremony hour approached, Julian stood at the altar, his heart full. He thought of Emily, the love he'd lost, and how Cassandra had brought light back into his life. He glanced at the crowd, searching for Lila. She was supposed to be the flower girl, scattering petals down the aisle, but she was nowhere in sight. A flicker of worry crossed his mind, but he pushed it aside. Lila was probably just nervous. She'd come around, upstairs. Lila sat on her bed, her sketchbook open to a new page. She'd drawn Cassandra's face, but this time it was different, harder, with eyes that didn't smile. Below it, she wrote, "Who is Elena Morrow?" Her small hands shook as she closed the book. She didn't want to hurt her father, but she loved him too much to stay silent. The wedding was starting soon, and she had to act fast. Lila slipped on her flower girl dress, a pale blue confection that made her feel like a princess, and tucked her notebook into the sash. She didn't know how she'd stop the wedding or what she'd say, but she knew one thing: the truth was worth fighting for. As she crept downstairs, the music swelled, and the guests turned to watch the bride's entrance. Cassandra appeared, radiant in her gown, her smile dazzling. But Lila's eyes were on her father, standing at the altar, his face alight with love. She took a deep breath, her small hand clutching the notebook. This was her moment. She didn't know if she'd be brave enough, but for her father, for the family they'd rebuilt after so much loss, she had to try. Chapter 2, Shadows of Secrets. The Pacific sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of coral and gold as the wedding ceremony began. The guests, a glittering assembly of wealth and power, sat in neat rows on the manicured lawn of Julian Warwick's estate. Their faces turned toward the floral arch where Julian stood, his expression a mix of anticipation and quiet joy. The string quartet's melody floated over the crowd, a soft counterpoint to the rhythmic crash of waves below the cliff. Cassandra Vale glided down the aisle, her ivory gown catching the fading light, her auburn hair glowing like a halo. To the guests, she was the picture of a perfect bride. To 9-year-old Lila Warwick, clutching her notebook behind a cluster of roses, she was a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Lila's heart pounded as she crouched, her flower girl dress catching on the thorny stems. She'd slipped out of the house just as the ceremony started, avoiding the ushers who'd been looking for her to take her place scattering petals. Her notebook, tucked into the sash of her dress, felt heavy with the weight of what she'd discovered in Cassandra's room. A passport with the name Elena Morrow, newspaper clippings about a fraud case, photos of Cassandra, or was it Elena, with other men. Lila didn't fully understand what it all meant, but the pieces screamed one truth: Cassandra wasn't who she claimed to be. She peeked through the roses, watching as Cassandra reached the altar. Julian took her hands, his smile wide and unguarded. Lila's chest tightened. She loved her father fiercely, loved the way he'd carried her through the dark days after her mother's death. reading her bedtime stories even when his voice cracked with grief. She didn't want to break his heart, but she couldn't let him marry a lie. She needed a plan, and she needed it now. The officiant, a silver-haired man with a soothing voice, began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Julian Warwick and Cassandra Vale. Lila's mind raced. She could run up the aisle and shout what she knew. But who would believe a 9-year-old over a poised, charming bride? She needed proof, something undeniable. Her eyes darted to the house where the briefcase still sat in Cassandra's room. If she could get it, show the passport and clippings to her father. Maybe he'd listen. But that meant leaving the ceremony, and time was running out. Marcus handed him the passport. Found this in Cassandra's room. Name's Elena Morrow. There's clippings too, fraud, scams. And a burner phone with suspicious calls. Julian's eyes flicked to the passport, his expression unreadable. He opened it, staring at the photo, then at the clippings. For a moment, he was silent, the weight of the evidence sinking in. Then he looked at Lila, his voice low. You went through her things. I had to, Lila said, tears welling. I heard her on the phone, Dad. Someone said you can't find out. I just wanted to protect you. Julian's jaw tightened, his gaze shifting to the altar where Cassandra stood. Her smile faltering as she noticed the commotion. The guests were starting to whisper, sensing something was wrong. Julian handed the passport back to Marcus. Keep this safe. I need to talk to her. Dad, don't, Lila started. But Julian was already striding back to the altar. Lila followed, her small hand clutching her notebook. Her heart pounding with fear and hope. She didn't know what would happen next, but she'd done what she could. The truth was out. And now it was up to her father to decide what to do with it. As Julian reached Cassandra, the music stopped and the crowd fell silent. Lila stood at the edge of the aisle. Her eyes locked on her father, praying he'd see what she saw, a woman who wasn't who she claimed to be. And a love that might not survive the truth. Chapter 3, The Truth Unveiled. The silence on the lawn was deafening, broken only by the distant crash of waves against the cliffs below Julian Warwick's estate. The guests, a sea of tailored suits and shimmering gowns, sat frozen, their eyes darting between Julian at the altar and Cassandra Vale, whose poised smile had begun to crack. Lila stood at the edge of the aisle, her small hands clutching her notebook, her heart a drumbeat of fear and hope. The briefcase, with its damning contents, passport, newspaper clippings, burner phone, rested in Marcus's hands. A silent accusation waiting to be voiced. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the scene in a twilight glow that felt both beautiful and ominous. Julian's face was a storm of emotions as he faced Cassandra. His hazel eyes, usually warm, were sharp with doubt, the passport and clippings burning holes in his mind. Cassandra, he said, his voice low but carrying in the stillness. We need to talk. Now. Cassandra's eyes flicked to the crowd, then back to Julian. Her smile tightened, but she nodded. Stepping closer to him, her ivory gown rustling. Darling, what's wrong? This is our moment. Her voice was honeyed, but there was an edge to it. A tremor that Lila caught from her place in the shadows. Not here, Julian said, glancing at the officiant, who looked bewildered. He took Cassandra's arm gently but firmly, leading her toward the small gazebo at the edge of the lawn, out of earshot of the guests. Lila hesitated, then followed, ignoring Marcus's whispered warning to stay put. She needed to hear this. Needed to know if her father would believe her. As they reached the gazebo, Julian turned to Cassandra, his expression unreadable. I need you to be honest with me, he said, holding up the passport Marcus had handed him. Who is Elena Morrow? Cassandra's face paled, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she recovered. Julian, what is this? Where did you get that? She reached for the passport, but Julian pulled it back, his gaze steady. Lila found it, he said. In your room. Along with newspaper clippings about a fraud case and a burner phone. I want the truth, Cassandra. Now. Lila, hidden behind a nearby hedge, held her breath. She could see Cassandra's hands tremble, her fingers twisting the lace of her veil. For a moment, the woman said nothing, her eyes searching Julian's face as if looking for an escape. Then she laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. This is absurd. That passport is old, from a different life. I changed my name years ago, legally. I was young, made mistakes. But fraud. Julian, you know me. Do I? Julian's voice was soft, but there was steel in it. You never mentioned a name change. Or a past that includes fraud allegations. And the phone, why do you need a burner? Cassandra's smile faltered. It's for work, darling. Discreet calls with donors. You know how sensitive philanthropy can be. Lila's stomach twisted. She wanted to shout, to run to her father and tell him not to believe her. But she stayed still, her small frame trembling with the weight of what she'd uncovered. Marcus, standing a few feet away, watched the exchange with a grim expression, the briefcase still in his grip. Julian's eyes narrowed. Lila overheard a call. A man saying, I can't find out. What's he talking about, Cassandra? Cassandra's composure cracked, her hands clenching into fists. Lila's a child, Julian. She's grieving her mother, imagining things. I love you. I've been nothing but honest, then explain this. Julian opened the briefcase, pulling out the newspaper clippings. He held up one with a headline, Elena Morrow vanishes after $10 million scam. The photo showed a younger Cassandra, her hair darker but her face unmistakable. This is you, isn't it? Cassandra's eyes darted to the crowd, where whispers were growing louder. The guests were straining to see, some standing for a better view. She took a step back, her voice dropping to a hiss. You're humiliating me in front of everyone. I thought you loved me. I do, Julian said, his voice breaking. Or I did. But I need the truth. If you love me, you'll tell me who you are. Lila couldn't stay silent anymore. She stepped out from behind the hedge, her notebook clutched to her chest. She's lying, Dad. She cried, her voice cutting through the tension. The guests gasped, heads turning toward the small girl in the blue flower girl dress. I heard the call. A man said you can't find out. And the passport, it's her, Dad. She's Elena Morrow, not Cassandra Vale. Cassandra's eyes darted to the crowd, where whispers were growing louder. The guests were straining to see, some standing for a better view. She took a step back, her voice dropping to a hiss. You're humiliating me in front of everyone. I thought you loved me. I do, Julian said, his voice breaking. Or I did. But I need the truth. If you love me, you'll tell me who you are. Lila couldn't stay silent anymore. She stepped out from behind the hedge, her notebook clutched to her chest. She's lying, Dad. She cried, her voice cutting through the tension. The guests gasped, heads turning toward the small girl in the blue flower girl dress. I heard the call. A man said you can't find out. And the passport, it's her, Dad. She's Elena Morrow, not Cassandra Vale. Cassandra's eyes flashed with something dangerous. But she quickly masked it with a look of pity. Lila, sweetheart, I know this is hard. You miss your mom. But making up stories won't bring her back. Don't talk about my mom. Lila's voice trembled, tears streaming down her cheeks. She opened her notebook, holding up the sketch of Cassandra's face. The one with cold, untrustworthy eyes. I know you're not who you say you are. I saw the pictures, the articles. You're going to hurt my dad. Julian's face crumpled as he looked at his daughter, her small frame shaking with conviction. He turned back to Cassandra, his voice barely above a whisper. Is she right? Are you Elena Morrow? Cassandra's shoulders slumped. And for the first time, the polished facade fell away. Her eyes glistened with tears. But they weren't the tears of a heartbroken bride, they were the tears of someone caught. Fine, she said, her voice low. Yes, I was Elena Morrow. But that was years ago. I left that life behind. I changed my name, started over. I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't understand. And the fraud? Julian asked, his voice steady but laced with pain. The men in those photos. The burner phone. Cassandra hesitated, then straightened, her tone defiant. I did what I had to do to survive. Those men. They were marks, yes, but they were greedy, Julian. They deserved it. I never meant to hurt you. I love you. Julian stared at her, the woman he'd thought he knew. The woman he'd planned to spend his life with. You used me, he said, his voice breaking. You saw a lonely widower, a man with money and a daughter who needed a mother. You saw an opportunity. No. Cassandra reached for him, but he stepped back, shaking his head. Julian, I love you. I swear it. The past is the past. But Julian's eyes were on Lila now. His daughter standing brave and tear-streaked. Her notebook a testament to her love for him. He knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. You were right, sweetheart, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You protected me. Lila buried her face in his chest, sobbing. I just want you to be okay, Dad. The guests were openly staring now, the ceremony forgotten. Marcus stepped forward, his hand on the briefcase. Sir, I can call the authorities. We have enough to start an investigation. Julian nodded, his face hardening. Do it. He stood, still holding Lila's hand, and faced Cassandra. You need to leave. Now. Cassandra's eyes widened, her voice rising. Julian, you can't do this. I'm not a criminal anymore. I am enough, Julian said, his voice like steel. You've lied to me, to my daughter. You're not welcome here. Cassandra's face twisted with anger, then despair. For a moment, it seemed she might argue. But the weight of the evidence and the eyes of the crowd silenced her. She turned, her gown trailing behind her as she walked back through the aisle. The guests parting like a sea. A few whispered, others stared in shock, but no one stopped her. She disappeared into the house, and moments later, the sound of a car engine roared to life. Julian sank into a chair. Lila still clinging to his side. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. Then announced, the ceremony is postponed. Please enjoy the reception. The guests murmured, some heading toward the open bar. Others slipping away. Sensing the weight of the moment, Lila looked up at her father. Her eyes searching his. Are you mad at me, Dad? Julian's face softened, and he cupped her cheek. Mad? Lila, you're the bravest person I know. You saved me from making a terrible mistake. His voice cracked, and he pulled her close, tears glistening in his eyes. I'm so proud of you. Marcus approached, his expression gentle. I've got the briefcase locked up, and the police are on their way. They'll want to talk to you both. Julian nodded, but his focus was on Lila. You're my everything, you know that. You and me, we're a team. Lila smiled through her tears, her small hand squeezing his. Always, Dad. As the guests dispersed, the lawn felt quieter. The fairy tale setting now a backdrop to a different kind of story, one of love and trust. Between a father and daughter. The truth had shattered Julian's dreams. But it had also reminded him of what mattered most. Lila, with her sharp eyes and fearless heart, had shown him that love wasn't just in grand gestures or whirlwind romances, it was in the quiet, fierce loyalty of a little girl who'd risked everything to protect him. As the stars began to speckle the sky, Julian and Lila sat together in the gazebo, her head resting on his shoulder. The future was uncertain, but they had each other. And for now, that was enough.